Okay, so I think it might be a Sid and Marty Krofft tune that I was humming.
Okay.
And so now I will spend the rest of the show trying to track it down.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I keep for whatever reason I was going to something with the name Summertime, and I can never remember the name of this song. And then I realized that it's not the song you did.
It might actually be the Banana Splits, but I have to listen to it.
Yeah. That's it.
Is it?
Yes.
Oh, good. I'm not entirely crazy.
No, it's the Banana Splits. What? Like the?
Yep, there it is.
Yeah.
Tra la 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 la.
Yeah.
Tra la 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 la. Yeah, that's it. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I keep did it with a washboard going in the background.
Oh.
And that's
really?
something's in the summertime.
In the summertime.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. I got you. Yeah, I think it is just called In the Summertime.
Yep. Yeah, I know. I just pulled it up and that's it.
Okay.
And for whatever that was used, like it was in commercials for something years ago.
Oh yeah, well, it was, what was it, like 20 years down the road from the actual release of the song?
Yeah.
They start reusing the songs in commercials.
Yeah, once it hits public domain, or when it used to hit public domain, because
Yep.
Yeah.
Mungo Jerry.
Man, his parents hated him.
All right. Yes, apparently so. Anyway, I'm glad my little time-wasting hum has resulted in 5 minutes of show.
Yep. Only an hour and 55 minutes to go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So.
Oh man.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm exhausted, which is to be expected.
Nice. Nice. Are you still making your first million over there on Kickstarter?
Yeah, in fits and starts.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess though, anybody listening to this at this point, you've got a week left. Cause
get on it, people.
Yeah, what do we do on this show? Tuesday or Thursday? I can't remember.
We Thursday this show. This show is Thursdayed. Right.
So a week from Thursday is the following Thursday, which is the 19th, which is the end of the Kickstarter. So it's still going strong. I'm still happy with it.
That seems like a thing somebody should do something about.
What? Like stop it from going strong?
No. I mean, a week to go or whatever it is. That's for the Kickstarter. Somebody should jump on that if you haven't already. Get over there and make this poor man rich.
Yeah. Well,
and also get a book about advice about how to play RPGs.
Yeah, but let's be honest. Nobody needs that book. I've been giving away that book for free, chapter by chapter, for 10 years on my website.
But at least you're not bitter. That's great. No, the thing I'm wondering about, sir, and this has nothing to do with our brief mention of your Kickstarter,
right. Though I do appreciate we get that plug in there.
Yes, yeah, and I hope you really appreciate it when I send you the bill at the end of the Kickstarter. The thing I wonder about though is, see, things like Kickstarter and GoFundMe, and I mean, there's a bunch of crowd funding sites now that do various things in various ways and all that. And I feel like a lot of the stuff that shows up on these things is not what you might call, this is going to sound dumb, necessary or useful or interesting or whatever. And I have not articulated what I'm thinking well. So we're going to dance around this a bit as I try to narrow it down. But it's just like a
lot of stuff is products that nobody was actually clamoring for.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's like I have to manufacture the need for this product in order for this product to be in existence.
See,
it's a lot like,
sorry. Go ahead.
It's a lot like those, those late night TV commercials where you're supposed to, nobody knows how to crack an egg and nobody knows how to wash dishes and nobody knows, basic skills at all of any sort. And so these guys are just like manufacturing. Are you tired of having to crack eggs into a pan and then fry them? Well, get the new micro egg Zappifier, kind of thing. It's like, I don't.
That was amazing, by the way. When I have reached the point where I am doing TV spots for my garbage, I am hiring you, sir.
Oh, okay. That's fine.
Also, I am starting a Kickstarter for the micro egg Zappifier.
Oh, good. That'll be great.
It sounds so much more convenient.
So now all you have to do is figure out who's going to use it and then manufacture the need for it. But no, this is kind of what I'm getting at, though. It seems like a giant arena for crap, by and large. Not that I'm not including you in this because obviously things are screwed up enough. We do need a book on how to GM and DM. Right. That's obvious. Mm-hmm. But a lot of other stuff, like I was looking at fountain pens the other day on Kickstarter because they fairly often have new fountain pens come up on there, and it's like they're all machined in precious metals or rare metals or brass. So there's like 700 different fountain pens in brass. They're all using the same parts. They all do the same thing.
Right.
But by and large, there's, somebody has a small indent here where the other one has a different indent somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And that's where we're at. There's no need for that.
Well,
there's no desire for that. It's just somebody going, oh, and you need this pen because it does something different. And it's not just fountain pens that do that. It's a lot of stuff.
Right.
On Kickstarter.
I understand exactly what you're saying. And the thing is, I have a cynical answer, and then I also have, what's the opposite of cynical? I don't remember because I don't usually do it.
Yeah, I'm optimistic answer?
Yeah,
a positive?
Yeah, I have a positive answer now. Mm-hmm. But I'm afraid to give any of them because right now I can't afford to be bitter toward Kickstarter.
Right. I realize this entire conversation
liking Kickstarter right now.
I realize this entire conversation has put you in a sticky spot. That where you might, in another week or two be able to comment on these sorts of stupid things that I come up with, but not right now.
Well, okay. So obviously, if I want to give the traditional businessy capitalist answer as to why this happens, okay, it is not easy. Assuming, putting aside crowdfunding for a moment, if you pretend crowdfunding does not exist, okay, there is more to getting a product out there than a good idea.
Right.
Because, unless you're independently wealthy, you can have a brilliant idea, because anyone can have a brilliant idea. But actually turning that into a product and getting it to market is not easy. You have to convince someone else to either invest in your idea, right, so that you can then construct the idea, or alternatively convince someone that your idea is valuable enough that they will buy it from you, and then they will take it to market, right? So there is a sort of arena in which ideas compete before anybody in the general public sees them.
Right. And I get that.
Right. Kickstarter, of course, doesn't end run around that. It lets people go directly to the people that they think are the consumers for this product. Now, the cynical side of me says that what you would end up with is a lot of garbage that nobody needs, that people will either fund because they're dumb and not good at knowing what they need, or alternatively will just end up dead on arrival and never get the funding. And we see this all the time. There's a lot of failed Kickstarters out there where people put this product out and they are not able to convince people that either the product is a good idea or they are the ones to deliver it. Though I think people also tend to be much more trusting on Kickstarter. So they give much less thought to, is this person actually able to deliver this? If people will fling the money at an idea,
Right.
without considering too much whether the idea will be seen. But then usually that's because the amount of money involved is fairly small per person. Unlike a venture capitalist who might be putting, tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars into your product so that you can manufacture, 10,000 of them. Each person is putting up, what, 10, 20 bucks? Mm-hmm. Which is money that they're actually probably okay never seeing again. So although like the creator of the product gets rid of a lot of the risk that they take, it's so diffused. And this is a change in attitude for me, I'll be honest, because I used to be very upset that the customers were the ones assuming all the risk. Because I don't feel that that's right, because the entrepreneur, the person with the idea, ends up with all of the profit. And the profit is supposed to be the reward for the risk. Right? That said, the risk on Kickstarter is so diffuse that most people are not out much money. So that kind of balances out. But anyway, the cynical side of me says that you're going to end up with a whole lot of garbage that people invest in because they are short-sighted or foolish or whatever. The more optimistic side of me says that this has taken something that used to be a luxury, which is to say investment in business ideas, which was limited to someone who had a lot of money, venture capitalists and banks and so on, and has opened it up to the free market, where everybody now has the power to invest, not in terms of, investing in a company and hoping that company is smart enough to assess its projects properly and whatever, but everybody can actually just invest in products they think are a good idea, and the market literally decides which ideas get to come to market and which ones don't. It's almost like a more pure form of free market. It's taking the capital investment side of a business and making that subject to free market capitalism.
Right.
And that side of me says it's actually probably not a bad thing then.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that, but a bit of me, and I don't know how significant the bit is, a bit of me wonders how much of it is just people keeping an eye on things and going, and going, oh, here's a batch of people that I feel like I can get away with something with. I'm not on Kickstarter because I have a good idea. I'm on Kickstarter because I think I can get money out of people for basically nothing.
See, there are obviously scams. Okay, there are people who put projects out there with literally no intention of delivering. But there are people who also, there have been scam artists and con artists who basically every time there is money somewhere, con artists will follow it. Right. They will figure out how to game the system. So I don't think Kickstarter is any worse than anything else. But I do think that there's a danger in that view, because there is a tendency among the market to cry scam whenever something goes wrong on Kickstarter. I'll take an example. Remember Mighty Number 9? The massive failure of a Kickstarter that was supposed to be a spiritual successor to Mega Man that made me very, very, very sad.
Right. I specifically remember you being sad on stream.
Oh my God, I was so miserable. But but here's the thing. Okay? That project failed for a lot of reasons. It was overambitious. There was a lot of I don't even want to say mismanagement. I think the biggest thing was that you had creative types who did not really understand the fan base to begin with and why the fans were interested in what they were doing. And so that led to some missed opportunities, not missed opportunities, but sort of mishandling of the fans' themselves. On top of that, the companies were not very communicative because they didn't understand that the community was, once the community invests the money, they become invested in the outcome. And you have to communicate with them. And, you know, there's a whole bunch of reasons why that Kickstarter was a bomb, but I don't think any of it was because Keiji Inafune actually said, I am going to scam these people. I'm going to take this money and run away from it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but a lot of people did call scam on it.
Yeah, but that's okay. Yes, I agree. A lot of people did and do call scam when a scam is not self-evident.
Right.
But I also think it's because a lot of the
now, I'm just using that as one example. Obviously, there have been a lot of projects that have bombed.
Sure.
And there is always this cry of scam.
Right. And the point I'm trying to get to is that a lot of that is people who I feel don't understand that there are such things as not scams.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like in the same way that people don't understand that they can react in ways that are not outrage.
Right.
Or that they can react and, you know, they can, you know what I'm getting at? It's like, it's not, they jump from zero to the worst possible case immediately.
Well, it's the whole, you know, never assume malice when incompetence is an easier explanation.
Right.
We've gone backwards on that. Okay. Now we always assume malice. You know, it's just, that's the way of things. People assume malice. But I do think that's part of the danger of Kickstarter, is because, I mean, here's the other side of that whole free market investing in ideas thing. And again, this is me talking from a business standpoint, right? If I am an investor, if I'm a venture capitalist or an investor or a bank and I'm lending someone money or whatever, they come to me and they present a business case, you know, a proposal, a plan, a prospectus, all this stuff. They give me all the data they can give me so that I can make as informed a decision as possible. And the more information they give me, the better off I am. You know, they show me that they've done their market research. They know that there's a demand for this product. They know how big their customer base is. You know, they know how much it'll cost to manufacture, all this stuff, right? And the companies that don't do that do not get money. You know, if a venture capitalist has $1 million to invest in an idea, he's going to give it to the people who have done their homework and have a 50-page business case, a prospectus, something to show, as opposed to the guy who shows up like in a dirty t-shirt, you know, in a mayonnaise covered room on a Kickstarter video and says, you know, I have this great idea and I'm sure it's going to be great because, you know, I like it. You know, they just never get the money.
A mayonnaise covered room?
Mayonnaise colored.
Oh, I was gonna say there must be a story.
You're like, how many Kickstarter videos are self-included, by the way? Are people just sitting in their room on a webcam and it's always that same sort of muted, washed out color that looks like everything is coated in mayonnaise.
Well, okay, fair enough.
Sorry, it was just a joke.
It's a white balance issue, but that's neither here nor there.
Whatever. But you understand, but Kickstarter doesn't require any of that. I only have to convince you personally that you might enjoy this idea to get you to part with $20 or $50 or whatever it's worth, right? And that's it. I don't have to convince you that I know how to run a business and that I'm going to make this a profitable idea, you know? Which means, again, that you have people who they may not be able to deliver because they haven't done their math, because they don't know what goes into a product, you know? That's why Kickstarter started requiring that risks and challenges section.
Oh, yeah, that's been helpful.
Right, yeah. It's because let me tell you something I learned, and I hate to say this because I don't want to throw my buddy Jim under a bus. All risks and challenges sections on Kickstarters are precisely the same. They always say the same thing. There are always risks and challenges, but we're going to do our best to avoid them. Yeah. You know?
No, we want risks and challenges. We want things to go wrong. We can't wait for that to happen.
Right.
It may take us a dozen years to deliver your product. Yeah, no, I know. It's
Right. So he handed me basically boilerplate and said, look, here
exactly.
it is.
Fancy it up any way you want.
Right.
There you go. That's what you're putting in. Right. Basically, I'm still not at home with Kickstarter. And I don't think I ever will be. It just, there are so many things about it that just leave a general bad taste in my mouth that I try to avoid it as much as possible.
Yeah.
I will happily support you, of course.
Thank you. And when it comes time to fund your product,
If
well, I mean, I myself and I admit I'm still kind of cool on Kickstarter. It really is not for me. Okay,
Yeah.
It's a little bit too the Wild West of funding.
Right.
For my tastes. Because I do honestly believe that consumer protection is important. Consumer protection laws and rules are important. And Kickstarter really doesn't have any of that yet. So that when there is a scam, we're not really even sure how to prosecute it.
Well, see, here's the other thing. Here's the other thing. It feels like Kickstarter has been around long enough that they should have worked some of this out.
Yeah, but no, how long did it take them to figure out sales tax on the internet, sir?
Yeah, I know.
Okay. Tax agencies, slowest agencies in government. Okay. Laws are not, the government does not react quickly. They just don't.
I'm not even talking about governmental regulation. I'm talking like Kickstarter having something in place to deal with some of the stuff.
Yeah, but see, Kickstarter has no vested interest in dealing with the stuff.
I know.
Until the stuff starts affecting how many people, whether people are, like if enough big scams came out that people started fleeing from Kickstarter would self-regulate. Or if enough people raised a stink to the government that the government started making noises about regulating crowdfunding, Kickstarter would then say, no, let us self-regulate.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's how it often works. And quite frankly, I'm of the opinion that self-regulation is better than government regulation.
Sure.
But, it will not happen until there is a need. Because as soon as Kickstarter starts imposing any regulations, there are going to be a certain number of people that are regulations. They provide a gateway to the market. Okay. As soon as you set down regulations, there's a certain number of people who are just going to have trouble meeting all the regulations, and they're just not going to be able to get their thing on Kickstarter, which cuts into Kickstarter's bottom line, because Kickstarter only makes money when projects are funded. So it's in their interest to let every product get on there. I mean, you saw a similar pattern with Steam. Steam finally, as far as regulating what is actually on the Steam store, and Steam has been going back and forth on this, and should we regulate and shouldn't we? And for a while, they were trying to be very responsive to certain issues and people calling for pulling things down. And eventually they realized it was like a zero-sum game. Because, people would get upset about a product and they would pull it down to show they were good. And then the other people would get mad that they pulled the product down. And then they would lose sales that way. And they realized it was a zero-sum game, and they have now given up on that. But they've also, in so doing, given up once again on trying to get rid of products that are there to take advantage of the Steam system. Things like asset flips and stuff where you can actually make a game out of store-bought assets, basically out of a level builder.
RPG Maker.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's other stuff too. Like you go onto the Unity store and buy a whole bunch of 3D assets and build basically the bare minimum of a game from that. Sell it on Steam, and then something to do with the trading cards and in-game and sort of like Steam's little all the little collectible thingamajiggers that you get for buying and playing games on Steam, and those can be resold on a secondary market. And so even if nobody buys your game, or very few people buy your game, you can make money on the secondary market selling something. I'm not very well versed in it because it's all PC gaming stuff.
Okay.
But there's a couple of different scams that have to do with just buying garbage assets and making a minimal game. And Steam's been hounded about that for a long time, about getting rid of that, because it does make people lose faith in the market.
It's interesting that you mentioned Steam.
Is it?
Did you see the thing that came out earlier in the month? I think it was like on the 1st or whatever.
For purposes of this conversation, I am going to say no, since I only saw it tonight when you said we were going to be discussing it.
Oh, okay.
So no, sir. What? I did not. Tell me more.
You're spoiling the mystery. All right. So apparently there was some sort of technical hiccup over at Steam on the 1st of July, which revealed a method for figuring out, within a fairly narrow ballpark, how many players there are for a bunch of Steam games.
Uh-huh.
It's quite the list. There is a huge list. In fact, 13,000 Steam games in total are available.
Yeah,
but
does this show, because you read the article, I haven't had a time to read the article because basically you just linked it to me tonight, but when they say people who are playing it, is this anybody who has purchased the game, or people who have put so many hours into the game, or? Well,
it's a bit fiddly, okay? Because what they actually got in terms of data numbers was a count, as I understand it, a count of the number of achievements for a selection of 13,000 games. And some math and a little bit of finagling leads to a narrow ballpark number for how many people are playing.
Oh, because when you get the achievements, it usually displays like the percentage of players who have earned that achievement. So if you know, okay, yeah, you could reverse engineer how many people are playing the game based. Well, okay. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thinking out loud.
Exactly. No.
You continue.
Nope. That's fine. That's fine. That means this is really only a count of the games that have Steam achievements put in by the developers.
Which is more than half the games on Steam, right? I mean, what did they say? 13,000 out of like 23,000?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is all kind of, there's a little wiggle room in here for things to be a little inaccurate, but since the same error has been applied to every single one of these, if an error exists, we still get some useful numbers to discuss.
Yeah. The numbers are not going to be that far off, and relatively speaking, they're going to be directionally right.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly. So what do you want to know? What shall I pull off of this list, or what would you like to make out of this list make obvious to us?
It's fascinating. I'm trying to scroll through the list. It's a long list, as you said. I mean, obviously we could start with the top. What are the top 5 games? Maybe.
Okay, the top 5 games. 5. We can do that.
What do we got?
Here we go. The top 5 games according to the leaked data from Steam. Team Fortress 2 has over 50 million players.
Okay.
Counter-Strike Global Offensive has a little over 46 million players. PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, 36.6 million. Unturned, and I have never heard of Unturned. I don't even know what it is.
Yeah, me neither.
has
the fourth most played game on Steam. How the heck do we not know about it?
Has a little over 27 million players, and Left 4 Dead 2 has 23 million players. Those are your top 5.
I just pulled up Unturned. It looks like, do you remember the little Playmobil figures?
Oh dear.
The little Playmobil toy figures?
Yeah.
Or crappy Legos is what it really is. So it looks like crappy Lego zombie survival. It looks like
awesome.
Minecraft. It looks like no, not quite that bad. It's not as blocky as Minecraft, but it's up there.
All right.
You're a survivor in the zombie-infested ruins of society. You must work with your friends and forge alliances to remain among the living.
Great.
Yeah. It's all of those games. It's every survival zombie game.
In a cutesy style. That's great.
Yeah. And
somebody will now write in and tell us that, oh no, it's brilliant that does all this. I don't care.
Well, clearly 27 million people think it actually is.
It's a zombie game. There are enough zombie games in the world. I don't need more. Anyway,
where is what's the other one? Where's Fortnite on here?
oh, you want to know where Fortnite is
Well,
on
because,
here?
PUBG came up, so
Right.
right.
Let's see here.
It does not seem Fortify Forts. Uh-oh.
Huh.
Either nobody's playing Fortnite or it doesn't have developer achievements.
That's possible. I'm seeing a fat load of nothing.
Yeah. I just did a find on page.
Yeah, that's what I did too. That's interesting. There's no Fortnite on here. I guess the achievements are not developed. Wait a minute. Wait. Stop. Think for a minute. Think. Is Fortnite even available on Steam?
Oh, I don't know.
Because I seem to remember having to download a specific thing from Exile Games to actually play it. So it may not actually be on there. So they're off the hook momentarily.
Okay. I see City Skylines is pretty high too.
Yeah. It's an interesting list. I just wanted to point that out to you since you brought up the Steam thing and whatnot. Yeah. It's an interesting list. We'll probably, show notes, link to it kind of thing. That'll be great.
Wow, I just pulled up Project High Rise. Just out of curiosity. 246,000.
Is that all?
Yeah. And I'm one of them.
You're one of them. What is Project High Rise?
It's a fun little. It's like a management. So do you know about? Okay, so here's the whole story of Project High Rise. Okay. Because I've gotten intrigued by it in the last week. It's a good idle game that is taking up a lot more of my time than it should.
Okay.
And when I say that, it is taking up a very limited amount of time, or a very limited amount of free time. Sure. But it's taking up a large portion of that small amount of free time. Okay, so way back in the day, in the early days of 1994, company named Maxis, they had published SimCity, and they started branching out to publishing other games. Right, that was Will Wright developed SimCity, and
yes.
And one of the games was developed by this guy Ute Saito, and he built a game called Sim Tower because he was fascinated by it. But basically, it's a simulation of building and managing a high-rise building, like a skyscraper, and setting aside. Well, what he built, because his personal fascination was elevators. Okay, so he built a very, very complex elevator simulator, because elevators are actually very complicated animals. Okay, you think, you hit the button and an elevator comes. But in larger buildings where they have, huge numbers of elevators and have to manage, thousands of people coming and going all at the same times of the day because there are rush hours and stuff, there's some very complex programming that goes into deciding which elevators will respond to what calls and how many calls they'll respond to going in each direction. And it changes depending on the time of day. There's a complex traffic management system that goes into designing elevators. And he was fascinated by this. So he built a video game around it. And it became, sort of like a vertical Sim City, where instead of, and it was popular, but not super popular. It was critically acclaimed, but not like, it wasn't critically acclaimed. It was middle of the road. It was mediocre. But the people who liked it, like me, we really liked it because it's an addicting little game. And it was sort of like a more constrained Sim City, to the point where you were kind of working against the constraints. You didn't just have the infinite space to deal with and stuff. He made a little sequel, which did not catch on and was not ported to, it wasn't as easy to obtain. And then it disappeared and people were sad. So recently I discovered through, there's a YouTube channel called LGR, Lazy Game Reviews.
Mm-hmm.
And he did a review of this game, Project High Rise. And because I loved Sim Tower, and he was the same as me. He loved Sim Tower back in the day, and he's been waiting for years for someone to do something. And he reviewed it and gave it a really glowing review. So I finally decided to buy it and try it. And I bought it ages ago, actually, and tried it once or twice and then forgot about it because that's what you do with Steam. Which is also why I asked how they were measuring these play numbers.
Right.
Because of how many people buy a game, boot it up, and then never play it again. But last week, after I got done working for the day, I was sitting in front of the computer and opened it up and started building a little tower. And I started to get the game. And it started to be a lot of fun. And so now I now have a 50-story high-rise that I've been working on in dribs and drabs. You know, retail and restaurants on the lower floors, and then office complexes as you go higher up. And then I have recently started adding luxury apartments to the top of it. And it is a very complicated game, and I've had a really interesting experience with it as far as the game design goes. So this game is not really about elevator traffic management the way Sim Tower was. It's a very different game. Okay, there's a lot. It's more about real estate, and it's about managing resources and making sure people have the resources they need. So you'll have office space and you want to rent it, right? And you'll have several people who are interested in renting it, and there'll be different types of companies. Like you might have a tech company, and you might have a financial company, and whatever. And when you look through it, they're offering to pay different amounts of rent, but they need and want different things. Like financial companies, they're very interested in having other financial companies in the same building to deal with. Or creative companies, like there's a bunch of talent agencies and stuff like that, media companies. They like to have restaurants. And they want a variety of restaurants because, they need to entertain clients and stuff. On top of that, all the buildings all the offices need different utilities. Like, they'll need cable hookups and electricity, water, gas, depending, all of that stuff. So you have to manage all of that. And they also want different services in the building. So like, media companies might not want to rent in your building if you don't have a commercial printing service already in your companies or in your building somewhere. Because presumably there's some other building out there that does have commercial printing services in, and it's easier for them to stay in the same building for that service, so they rent there. So it sort of simulates the idea that you're competing to attract the best companies to your building. And the same is true of residences. So if you have stores that the residents need, like grocery stores and drugstores and stuff, they'll want to rent apartments in your building. And there's a reputation system, and there's a whole bunch. So there's all these little fiddly bits to manage. And when you're trying to attract big companies to rent your most expensive, biggest office spaces, then there's all these cascading needs that they have because they want certain other businesses in your building already, and those businesses have needs, and some of those needs have different needs. And so you're kind of constantly fiddling all of this stuff, right?
Sure.
Okay. Now, this is what happened. I was trying to attract an international, basically a banking corporation to open their headquarters in my building. Because they pay a lot of rent, Well, and I had some very expensive premium floor space all set aside for them. And they said, listen, we'd love to come into your building, but you don't have enough financial businesses in your building. And they obviously, the corporate headquarters, they want other people to do business with. It's like, okay, that's no problem. I have more floor space. I'll just open it up. And I start, opening up large offices and trying to draw in financial businesses and get all their needs. And I keep opening them up more and more and more and more and keep offering this space back to this banking company. And they don't want it. And I've got now dozens and dozens of these financial companies. And I'm getting frustrated because I can't figure out what they want. Because the game isn't super clear about they don't tell you, you need 3 more financial companies. It's just, you get this vague little frowny face that says, not enough financial companies in your building. So, which, now I was getting annoyed. And so finally I went online and I checked checking different forums to see if someone could just tell me how many damn financial companies to build. Nobody knows.
Huh.
And the creators came out and they clarified something, and apparently they're updating the game to be a little clearer. So they clarified that if you're having trouble meeting some of these requirements, you might want to try mixing things up a little. So, like, if you're trying to attract a bank and you need lots of financial companies, you can't just attract big financial companies. You need some small office space for smaller financial firms, like, little investment firms, and then some larger offices. So it's not the number, it's the variety. And there was an argument going on in the forums with the developer, because the developers were actually very responsive in the forum, apparently. And the argument was, why don't you just tell us the number? And the developer finally came back and said, look, we admit we could clarify some of this stuff, and we're working on that. We're going to clarify the information that's presented in the game. But we also are purposely leaving it a little vague. Because if we just tell you, build X of this and X of this, then all we're doing is giving you a checklist. Okay? And that's not what we wanted to do. There are vagaries in people management. There are vagaries in real estate, where the company is not going to say, yeah, you need 3 more big financial offices and 2 more small financial offices. They're just going to say to you, you don't have enough other people in this building to do business with, and you're going to be left scratching your head. And it's up to you to kind of experiment and take a holistic approach and say, hey, I want to attract big banking firms. I'm going to build my whole building toward financial companies. And then you satisfy all the needs and you focus on financial companies instead of trying to be a generalist. And what it really came down to is that in this game, you can't really generalize. You kind of have to pick an approach, and your building becomes specialized over time, And that's what all the stuff is moving toward, but it does it all in a very vague way. And at first I walked away from that a little annoyed. I'm like, well, they're just being purposely obtuse. But the more I thought about it, because then I went back and then I started playing with it. And I'd realized I'd been doing stuff like that all along. It's like, okay, they need this many creative businesses to open this, or they need this. Where do I have room for this? It's like, you know what? Maybe I'm going to move some of these medical offices out, because I'm not really focusing on medical offices anymore, and they're not very high rent operations. So maybe I'll give over their office spaces. And what I found was I was actually sort of in the process of not quite knowing. I was actually experimenting and sort of developing a focus. So the lack of perfect information was causing me to toy with things and see what worked best and optimize. And it made it more complex than it otherwise would have been if you just had a list of requirements that said you must have this many of this type of office to open this office. It became less about a checklist and more about considering the whole space and just sort of thinking through it. So
that makes sense.
Yeah. It's very interesting, because normally, like, I would always admonish a game designer to be as clear as possible, But then it goes back to that. We've talked about the optimizing the fun out of the game, right?
Uh-huh.
Where then I could just sit there with a spreadsheet, or in this case, a piece of graph paper, because I know the sizes of all the units, and figure out exactly the optimal layout to get this many banking companies. Which isn't as fun, because then I'm not really engaging with the game as a simulation of a living organism. And that's what it sort of comes down to, is you start to think of the tower as a living thing, with all these little parts that are all that all have vague needs, and tweaking one changes another. At one point, I was changing over from restaurant to retail space. Because the city offered me a contract to open up some more retail space. So I bulldozed some restaurants, and then all of a sudden I had a bunch of complaints from a bunch of offices. All of my creative firms were getting mad because they didn't have enough restaurant variety to entertain their clients anymore. They're like, hey, we're thinking about moving out. You bulldozed all that restaurant space. And we use that. Like, oh, so it's fun. I'm trying to think of what I'm trying to say here. You understand what I'm trying to say. You have to play with it. It just doesn't tell you everything.
It's a puzzle.
Yeah. But it's an open puzzle. It's an economic puzzle. It's a puzzle with soft edges.
It's a puzzle for accountants.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's probably no surprise that I thoroughly enjoy management sims.
Right.
Like SimCity and like this and like a few others. But I'm currently very addicted to this one now. I have 2 corrections I have to make that are not in the notes.
Oh, no. Corrections. Yeah. We got something wrong?
No, I did. I take the blame for both of them.
That's fine. Go ahead.
A couple of weeks ago, I talked about how to host a dungeon.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember exactly when. And I was describing the person who made it as that guy who does the maps with the crosshatches.
Uh-oh.
Thinking of Dyson Logos, whose maps are fantastic.
Uh-huh.
It was not. It was Tony Dowler. They are 2 totally different people.
You are fired.
Yeah, Tony Dowler does how to host a dungeon. Dyson Logos makes those maps I like, and I love them both in totally platonic ways.
And now, from now on, you're just going to have to make your own dungeons.
The other thing is that several people emailed me and sent me private messages, and there's at least one comment on one of the episodes. The game I was trying to think of where you make soup in space was Nom Nom Galaxy. Or Nom Nom Galaxy. Nom Nom Galaxy.
Nom Nom? Nom Nom Nom
Nom Nom Galaxy.
Okay. I'm disappointed you didn't follow up.
What was that?
I said I'm disappointed you didn't follow up.
Oh.
I clearly said Manomanop.
Oh, sorry. What? I'm sorry, it's just going to be in the summertime now all night. It's just stuck in my head.
Jeez. Somebody help me.
In the summertime when it's hot as on the summer.
Yeah, when it blah 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 blah. Yeah, the Bound Fenrir on YouTube, speaking about show 39, says everyone talks about both luck and dice behaving, but I have a theory that it's a bit more middle ground than the views you've espoused this episode. Are totally serious views espoused in that episode.
Yes.
Manufacturing error. Ostensibly, all D20s are radially symmetric pieces of plastic. But who's to say they are actually balanced? Clearly, Angry's dice killer isn't. It has shown bias. Maybe that's some unknown supernatural force. Or maybe it's just weighted, not on purpose, mind, but by manufacturing error, and tends... maybe it's just weighted... Okay. Maybe it's just weighted in a way that lends it towards landing 20 up. When buying dice, I always get a lot of flack from other nearby gamers because I roll all the luck out of them. But really, I'm learning the leanings, the bias of that dice. I'm trying to see if its minute manufacturing differences lead it to landing more towards 20 or towards 1. Maybe it's my own confirmation bias, but I've yet to see a die that didn't lean lower or higher than statistical average. Mr. Fenrir, sir, save yourself a lot of rolling and just take a glass of heavily salted water with you. There's videos that explain all that. If you're a little confused, but go ahead.
No, I have nothing to add to that.
Okay, so here's the thing to know. All right, Luzaki will spend endless years telling you how crappily manufactured everybody else's dice are, and how wonderfully accurate and finely made his are. Keep in mind, Luzaki is the same person who thought the Zakihedron was a good idea.
Do you know they're on like version 8 or 9 of that thing now?
I'm surprised they have more than one, frankly. Does it come with a handbrake so you can stop it rolling across the table?
They have actually... He has been trying to perfect... I got a whole speech on it. I ended up at the Game Science booth at Gen Con last year. And Tiny and I got an entire thing about whatever version, the freaking 100-sided die they're on now, and how they've been trying to, the braking problem, and how much grit is inside of it, and the depth of the dimples, and it's like, just roll 2d10.
I don't understand how he didn't think that something the size and shape of a golf ball wasn't going to take off rolling across the table.
Well, they do sell dice trays, you know.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. But I'm not sure it would roll in a dice tray, though. See, that would be the opposite problem. I'm not sure it works in a dice tray. All right, whatever. Anyway, there's a lot of dice that are manufactured. You know those 100-pound, or not 100-pound, but pound of dice bags with like 100 dice in them or whatever they are.
Mm-hmm.
Those are factory seconds.
Right.
So none of those in those bags are true rollers. That's just, you just take that as given. None of them going to roll exactly correctly. But I think the larger problem here is that in order for your strategy of checking the die to see if it rolls with a high bias or a low bias, in order for that to be valuable and worthwhile, you have to be planning to roll that die about 1 billion times.
Let's just say this what it is, okay? With apologies to the Bound Fenrir right now, okay? Because I'm going to apologize for what I'm about to say, because it's not going to be nice.
Okay.
Okay? All of the high-minded people out there who dismiss all the talk about luck and dice behavior and all the weird superstitions and scoff at it because of their objective understanding of how it's all just down to the weighting of the dice and the manufacturing errors, and therefore all you have to do is just roll it 1,000,000 times or dunk it in salt water or whatever, and then you can figure out the bias, and then you know which dice to roll for when you need a high roll and which dice to roll when you need a roll. You guys are just as bad. Because at the end of the day, this is a game about pretend elves for which there is no cash prize. And you figuring out the weighting of your dice by rolling them an infinite number of times and then taking all the results so that you get rid of any confirmation bias, it is just as obsessive and pointless as me rearranging my dice every time so that they know which way they're supposed to roll. It's all obsessive and pointless. But it's also fun.
Yeah. It's just fun. It's just, you sit there and fiddle around with it. Convince people of things.
It's not even convincing people of, like, honestly, it's part of the whole fantasy of human existence. Okay? Because no matter, like, okay, there is a stupid you inside of your brain, right?
What?
There's a stupid you inside of your brain. There's the lizard brain. It's the part of your brain that every time you hear that riddle about which weighs more, a pound of feathers or a pound of bricks, obviously the smart part of your brain says they both weigh the same because a pound is a pound. But there's that voice in the back of your head that goes, yeah, but that pound of bricks has got to weigh just a little bit more. It's bricks. Right? There's a stupid you. There's a stupid voice inside of your head. And it's that stupid voice that is desperate to control a world that is essentially just chaos all around you. Because the idea that you can foresee for a moment the consequences of any decision you make enough to make a rational, reasonable decision is insane. And so, your poor, terrified brain, screaming in the void of chaos, has to do whatever it can to assert some kind of control over reality to keep you sane. It is the same reason that when you are bowling and you are just about to get that strike, you lean your body to steer the ball, okay? You have to do it to keep you sane. Whatever your little obsessive, pointless quirk is, whether it is checking the weighting or just believing in dice superstitions, it is important that you do it because sanity is more important than rationalism in the universe. That is my speech. I am done.
Okay, so I was an eavesdropping party to a conversation. I wasn't participating myself, I don't think. I don't recall that I was participating. But anyway, there was a conversation I overheard somewhere that suggested that there's sort of this thing about adventure modules where they used to be fun to read, and they are not so much fun to read anymore.
Are you referring to the conversation that went on in my Discord?
Yes, I steal freely from your Discord.
Yeah, because that wasn't quite what was discussed. But it was a very interesting discussion.
Uh-huh.
Nonetheless, because we were talking about how, like, if you read modern adventure modules, either by Paizo or by Wizards of the Coast, they're loaded with a lot of crap. Like, there's a lot of stuff that is never going to find use at the table.
Sure.
Just so many details. I'm reading the Rise of the Rune Lords adventure path right now, which was one of the...
Okay.
I think it was the first adventure path that Paizo published. And then they republished an anniversary edition in a big, nice hardbound book. And I bought that because I was curious about the path. I never read it, so I started leafing through it and started reading. I've actually been trying to read a number of modules lately because as part of my Kickstarter obligations, I now have to write a module. And I'm curious, like, what is actually out there now. And
what have you discovered?
It's garbage.
Oh, all of it?
I don't know all of it, but as the discussion broke, and I didn't even start the discussion, it was other people who were talking about how, I think it was, they were looking through Curse of Strahd.
Sure.
They were reading through Curse of Strahd. And how there is so much bloat in there that is not related to the adventure in any way. And goes just beyond, like, fleshing out the setting to the point where there are paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs of detail about the backstories of minor NPCs that will, are unlikely to feature in anybody's games in more than a single scene where they say, oh yeah, Vestrad's a vampire up at the castle. We all know about him. He is terrible. Do not go to the castle. And that's the sum total of the interaction. I have no idea what accent that was, but whatever.
It worked for me.
Yeah.
It's fine.
And they're so bloated. And somebody linked me, and now I'm going to have to search back through my Discord and find this. And this was days ago. Somebody linked me to an interview, to a discussion with Paizo, with a representative from Paizo, actually. And the discussion was about writing modules. And specifically, they said, we understand that most people, that GMs actually want modules that are interesting to read, and so, and there was some discussion about what that led to in terms of the module design. Like, one of the things is that instead of presenting all the information up front, modules tend to bury information later on so that the GM reading the module can get the same sort of surprise twist that the players will get when it happens at the table. Because writing something that's interesting to read is a lot different than writing something that is useful to run at the table. Anyway, but
so naturally they attempt to do both at the same time.
Yeah. Well, at least that's what this representative. I'm desperately now trying to find this article because I can't remember even when this conversation was. It was days ago, and it might try to find anything in my Discord is hard.
Well, let me. I mean, maybe I can save you a little bit here of scrolling and running around and all that kind of stuff because my question though is, is not so much that they should be fun for GMs to read and all that. It's that, do they need to be fun for GMs to read, and does it help the GM in any way?
Well, that's an interesting question, because one of the arguments in the role-playing game industry has been about whether adventure modules actually sell. Whether they are a good like a good whatchamacallit. What am I trying to say? What
I don't have any idea, but I'm going to assume you mean, is it worth making one for people to use, and will it recoup its cost?
Well, yeah, exactly. Because here's the issue with role-playing games, right? You hit a certain point, and you can argue about when this point is going to be, but you hit a certain point where you're selling a role-playing game where pretty much everybody who is going to buy the core rule books, have bought them, And I mean, they're still going to keep selling. You're always going to sell a few more because people are going to keep discovering your game. But you have a big surge at the beginning. And then, like, roughly 2 years after your edition of your game comes out, that's it. You have sold almost all of the core rulebooks you're ever going to sell. And after that, if you want to keep your role-playing game going, you've got to be publishing something for people to buy. Otherwise, because companies need money, or else they go out of business, right? I mean, that's the basics of it.
Yeah, unless they're wickedly familiar with Kickstarter.
Yeah, well, even that's not a guarantee anymore. It's very interesting how close Monty Cook's last Kickstarter came to not hitting the reprint of No Thank You Evil. But yeah, that's neither here nor there.
Right, moving on.
But the point is, though, that so there's all these questions, and it's kind of scary when you talk to industry insiders, and they talk about these arguments and debates that are happening in this industry that has existed for 40 years about how to make money at it. Shouldn't you have figured this out?
Somebody should at least have a data sheet.
Somebody should have a clue. Okay, but there is the question of, in terms of just making money, what is the way to support your role-playing game product? Okay, how do you support it? Do you do it with modules?
You make lots of miniatures.
Mm-hmm.
You make lots of miniatures. You make about 17 different GM screens.
Right.
You make books that are a mishmash of everything.
Right.
Half module, half setting, half additional rules, half, Well, is that seems to be how it's done.
Well, yeah. Well, it's sort of interesting that's been, because that's Wizards of the Coast's current approach. Is
it?
Apart from high-end long modules, because that's what they've currently stuck to, is these long, long, thick, hardbound, premium content modules. Apart from that, what they're just taking a scattershot approach of just throwing everything they can into a book and seeing if that one sells. Which, again, putting aside all of the claims of how great Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons & Dragons is doing, because all of that is suspect, it sort of shows that they're still trying to work out what the best way to support a role-playing game in the long term is. And you could argue that one of the failures of 4th edition might be that they over-supported it to the point where they saturated the market and basically fatigued all their fans, so all their sales of everything was dropping off, where maybe a more measured approach, trickling stuff out a little bit slower might have served well. And maybe that's why the life cycle of 4th edition, as they call it, the edition lifestyle, was so short. But that's, again, it's sort of like the question of, okay, well then why don't they know how to support these things? So honestly, as far as the question of should modules be good, should they be fun for the GMs to read? Should they be interesting? If Paizo is saying that that's the approach they've taken, then I'm going to say that yes, they should. Because the one thing I'm going to say for Paizo, they know how to support a product. But then that's how they got started. That was their business model. They were originally a third-party publisher for Dungeons & Dragons that were then contracted to do official stuff for Dungeons & Dragons that were then left by the wayside when Dungeons & Dragons moved to 4th edition and decided they weren't going to license anyone to do anything for 4th edition. And that's when Paizo said, okay, well then we'll make our own 3rd edition with blackjack and hookers. In fact, forget the blackjack and hookers because they actually made Pathfinder. You know, and that's where Pathfinder came from. But they know how to support a product. They're really good at it. That's how they make their money. I mean, if you think about it, Pathfinder it's a game that was released 18 years ago because it is just an update to the 3.5 rule set. And most of the people who were playing Pathfinder, most of the adopters of Pathfinder were playing 3rd edition and didn't want to change over. That was the initial fan base. And I realize there's a lot bigger fan base now, but that was the initial fan base for Pathfinder. Okay. So they know how to support a product because they've kept that thing alive for almost 20 years. So yeah, if they say that this is why people buy it, yeah, do you read modules?
Not really, no.
I mean, you don't run any.
No, I don't run any.
Right.
But occasionally, like, I've read a lot of the Star Wars ones because there is some useful stuff in there. You know, there's always one new gimmick in each Star Wars module, you know, so you read those to just see what the gimmick is. But in general, I don't just read a module unless I'm looking for something specific, you know. Mm-hmm. Maybe I steal an encounter out of one or something if it happens to fit, but that's about it. But while you were in that little conversation there, that little discussion there, I had another question that relates to this, kind of.
Okay.
That I hadn't previously thought about before now.
Though we should also, before we go further, because we like to leave people with a question to answer.
Sure.
So, I mean, this is a good one. Do you, as a GM, want modules that are enjoyable and engaging for you to read? Or do you want them to, or is there an alternative? Like, do you want them to be minimalist and easy to run? And do you read modules for fun, whether you run them or not? So, okay. Now.
Good question.
Yeah, I thought so.
You guys answer that question. Now, I'm going to ask my other question because this derailed me about the middle of the conversation.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. No, it's a good derailment, I think, because I'm going to ask you the next question, which is that, can you think of any other industry or product or anything like that is handled the same way as tabletop RPGs are?
No.
In other words, there's like the core rules released, and then you get all these supplements and adventures and things added onto it.
Actually, that's not true.
I mean, okay, the obvious parallel is DLC content for video games.
It's not even DLC, sir.
Okay.
Okay, here's my argument. Dungeons & Dragons is not a game. It's a system. Mm-hmm. Right? Dungeons & Dragons is a game console.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So, and it's like selling an Xbox or a PlayStation. The modules and the campaign settings and all of that stuff, the stuff that's actually playable stuff, those are your games. The only difference between D&D and video games is that there is also a robust set of developer tools so that everybody can make and distribute their own content, which actually isn't that different because then you start to go into like the Steam creator community where people can mod their games and share their mods, you know?
Okay.
So in that respect, I would say, yeah, actually role-playing games are more similar to video games than you might want to think or that you might realize.
Then what lessons no, hold it. No. This is getting, okay. I've got about 3 different thoughts at once. So D&D is Pathfinder the same sort of, you know, a framework around which you hang other games?
Sure. Absolutely. In fact, it's more so. Because as I said, Pathfinder's entire business model is based around getting people to buy the modules for Pathfinder. And the supplements and the add-ons. Okay, so you might consider those to be you bought the console because you bought the core rules. Now buy the peripherals, and buy the developer kits and the developers tools, and buy the games themselves.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what lessons should the RPG industry at large be taking from video games about how to keep their game alive?
All right, this is okay. Because there is a big difference, too.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of the elephant in the room difference.
Oh, good.
Okay? Because the problem is that the person who buys all of the stuff for role-playing games is not the person playing the game. It's the person running the game.
Mm-hmm.
Which is sort of the equivalent of if the CPU in your Pathfinder, or in your Pathfinder, dang it! The CPU in your PlayStation 4 was the one actually buying games for you, so that it had something to run for you. So from that respect, the idea that the game should have something to tantalize the GM with, to sweeten the deal, isn't that ridiculous?
Yeah, I guess not.
But one wonders then, okay, so now here's an interesting question though. Let us suppose, let's take as an assumption that Paizo is correct, that there are a certain number of GMs who purchase modules because they are good to read, whether they are going to run those modules or not, right?
Right.
So now, what percentage of GMs, of Pathfinder GMs, are buying modules that they never run just to read them?
Huh.
Because, I can say, interestingly enough, I am one of those people. Although I never run published modules, I do buy a few of them. I'm not a big buyer of modules, but I have bought a few of them, and I do read them. I'm not impressed by what I'm reading, because my first thought about them is, how would I use this at the table? Because I'm reading them as a critical exercise, to be honest. I'm not reading them for fun or mining them for ideas at this point. I'm actually reading them to find out what these companies are doing. Because I am in the business or I want to be in the business of making my own, But it is sort of an interesting question, isn't it? How many people buy modules just to read them?
Why not just buy the novels then?
I don't know. Why? For the same reason, how many splat books have you bought for a game you're never going to run? Don't tell me you don't, because every gamer does. We all buy way more books than we're ever going to use.
Okay, so what about this? What if, for a given adventure, it came with the module, which was just the practical game mechanic-y stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And packaged with it is the novel of that adventure.
Well, see, I'm not. This is where we get, because now we're trying to guess at behavior where we're just assuming things.
Yes, but that's the fun part.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. But here's my problem with saying, well, why don't we try that and see? Assuming that there are people who buy modules just to read the modules, okay, and they're not buying them to run them. And we want to appeal to those people, but also appeal to the people who are going to run the module by separating the two and then packaging them together. Then we have to ask the question of why those people are reading adventure modules for fun reading instead of just reading novels.
Uh-huh.
Because quite honestly, there's a lot of fantasy literature out there, and modules are not where you're going to get the best stories.
Nope.
Okay? So these people, assuming that there is a market for people who read modules for fun, whether they run them or not, are choosing that over a novel.
Right.
So what is it in the module they're getting? Because now if we try to change the format of the module, we might inadvertently destroy whatever it is that makes the module different from a novel, that makes people want to read that instead of a novel. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And isn't that a delightful conundrum?
So then I guess what we'd better do is ask the follow-up question to the question we're going to ask the audience,
Mm-hmm.
which is, why do you read the module for enjoyment?
Right. But then we have the other problem of people cannot be trusted to explain the reasons for the things they do.
No, but I love to watch him struggle. I love to watch him struggling to try.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That was uncalled for. But what I would really like to do personally is just kidnap some brand manager or something from Paizo, tie them down and interrogate them until I find out why they do what they do.
I'm going to say 3 words and 3 letters to you.
Okay.
And I want your immediate, honest reaction to it, okay?
Okay.
The Witcher tabletop RPG.
Could be fun. Sorry, you wanted my immediate reaction. My
Yes,
immediate reaction is, that could be fun.
Okay. All right. Does it need to exist? Should it exist? Is it a thing that you think will be good to have had?
I don't know.
Are
It
you
depends
a
on if
monkey?
it's fun. I mean, you like the question, should or does it need to?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do.
These are toys, sir.
No, I understand that, sir.
Okay. They don't need to exist.
No,
Their
they don't. None of them do.
Their existence
None of
is
them do.
entirely
think-
justified by one question. Is it fun?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay.
But, sir,
Yeah.
I have been reminded more times than I care to count that fun is not a valid criteria.
Fun is not a valid criteria for your skill as a GM. And the reason it is not a valid criteria is not because it is somehow not the point of what you're doing, but because it is completely non-actionable. Okay, that's the problem. Is if someone says, listen, okay, so how do you DM? And you say, well, you make sure everybody's having fun. That tells precisely nothing.
Yeah, but see, your focus is too narrow. Okay, because the other thing is, as I have discovered in reviewing things,
Mm-hmm.
fun doesn't matter. Nobody cares if a game is fun.
All right, so tell me then, because this is information that is useful to me.
Uh-huh.
Tell me then, sir, what is it that people care about?
I don't know, but I'm constantly told that fun is not the point of a review. Nobody cares if you had fun playing the game, because your experience is not going to be the experience of the person who ends up with the game based on your review or not.
Who is telling you that?
Everybody.
Who's everybody?
Everybody who reviews games. Everybody who reads reviews of games. Fun does not matter. It's all about whether the mechanics work right. It's all about whether or not you evoke a feeling of the genre that the game is in. It's all about, does the setting seem alive? It's all...
Hold on a second. Hold on.
Okay.
Okay. Here is the thing. I don't even know. Are you playing with me here? Do I have to explain this?
I am a little bit playing with you, but I am also deadly serious that there is a significant, non-trivial percentage of people out there who will tell you that fun does not matter when it comes to reviewing or talking about games, whether those are tabletop games or video games.
That is both true and false. No, I'm genuinely serious. I am not.
All right.
I'm not jerking you around at all. Okay? Because here's the problem. If a review consists entirely of 3 words, I had fun, that is a useless review to you, because all that does is it tells you about one person's very subjective experience, right? And so to that extent, the idea of whether or not it was fun or not is not a good criteria for a review. It's not where you should begin and end your review. Okay. The value in a reviewer, their ability is in articulating why they had the emotional response they had. Be it the game mechanics are particularly satisfying, the controls are really, really tight, so that every the game is fluid and responsive. It feels very smooth and easy to play. Okay, which now if the reviewer is saying that, well, now it's telling you some things about what the reviewer values in a game, and also telling you something about the game itself. If you're looking at a review for an action game, and you like really hardcore action games, then fluidity of the controls directly impacts your enjoyment of the experience. Okay? If you're reading a review of a turn-based role-playing game where you're just picking actions from a menu, and the reviewer is talking about the fluidity of the controls, it's irrelevant to the game and also irrelevant to your interests. Because you're not interested in, second by second Twitch type gameplay. And if that stuff is a turnoff for you because you like a slower pace and being able to think, then the control issue affects your ability to judge, affects your fun of the game. Okay? So the point of a reviewer is not just to say whether it was fun or not. Obviously, they should say whether it was fun or not, because there is a certain amount of, the whole being greater than the sum of the parts, right? Okay. So that, you can break down a game and analyze all of the components. Just like you can analyze all of the ingredients in something and say this has chocolate and cream cheese filling and whatever. And if people like chocolate and they like cream cheese filling, they'll be able to say, yeah, that sounds good. But there's also something about the whole experience that has to be mentioned. So it's valid for the developer or the reviewer to say they had fun or not fun, but they can't just stop there. They have to articulate why. Because they also have to give you enough information to guess whether or not you're going to have fun based on what you know of what you like. And how much you know about the reviewer. But the whole point of a review is not just to say whether they had fun or not, but also to articulate enough about their experience and themselves to give you all of the information you need to guess whether this is worth dropping $60 on because you will probably have fun or probably not have fun. Okay. But again, it's the fun part of it isn't by itself actionable. This game is fun is not actionable advice for anyone.
Okay, so then tell me, sir, what is it about the Witcher RPG tabletop game makes you think it's going to be fun?
I didn't say it was going to be fun. I said it could be fun.
Okay, what makes you think it could be fun?
Because the Witcher is an interesting, very well-developed fantasy role-playing game world that is focused on, basically monster hunting experts going out into the world and slaying monsters based on things like, investigating, researching, setting traps, understanding your foe. And if that is translated well to a tabletop RPG, it could be fun. Because The Witcher was fun and also engaging. And also, I meant also the world itself is engaging. It is an interesting world with interesting gameplay elements. And so a fantasy role-playing game that is very tailored to what The Witcher does well would be familiar enough for fans of fantasy, but also different enough to provide an experience that you don't get directly from games like Dungeons & Dragons and Pathfinder. That's all I'm saying, is it has the possibility to be fun.
Very good.
It could also suck. I mean, look, if it's just a D20 clone, if it's just another D20 game in the long pile of D20 games, if it's basically just D&D again, then no, it's a waste of a game, because in that case, what it did was waste the concept, because there are things that you do in The Witcher. I only really played extensively The Witcher 3. I tried to play the first one, and it was too complicated.
I made the mistake of trying to read the books.
You think that was a mistake? I've heard good things about the books.
Of course you have.
I thought you make it sound like I'm always arguing. I'm genuinely asking, why do you think the books were a mistake to read? Because I have heard good things.
Yes, I heard a bunch of good things too. I found them unengaging. I found the characters very shallow. I found the plots pretty formulaic. And for somebody who hunted monsters, he did not hunt a lot of monsters in the first 3 books.
If I remember from what I tried to play of the first game, he did not hunt many monsters in the first game either.
Yeah.
And in the third game, his time was spent 50-50 between hunting monsters and political BS.
Yeah. Yeah, I ended up at a point where there was one I found not quite as objectionable as the rest. And that was the first one. I can't even remember the name of it now, but the first one with the short stories in it.
Oh.
The short stories were a good use of The Witcher and what he does and all that kind of stuff. The full novel length ones, not so much.
Well, I think because the idea of a bounty hunting monster hunter, it sort of lends itself to a short story format.
You would think, yes.
Anyway.
Okay, there. I have explained.
I'm sorry, I didn't. You make it sound like I put you out so badly asking for an explanation.
No, you're fine. You're fine. The thing I'm wondering about the Witcher game, though, is what they're going to have to do to capture, the right feel. Because the Witcher universe is not particularly clean. You know what I mean?
No, it's a pretty gritty, dark universe.
Yeah, and I'm thinking to myself, there are a lot of gritty, dark universe role-playing games, tabletop out there. Mm-hmm. Especially in the fantasy one. In the fantasy genre, I mean, but I don't know. I want it to be good and I want it to be interesting, but my suspicion is it's going to be a lot like Dragon Age.
Yeah.
And it's going to end up being kind of not exactly what anybody was expecting in a fairly damaging way.
Yeah, fair. Yeah. Like, Dragon Age is a perfectly serviceable game.
Sure.
But it is also, as far as role-playing games go, it is really bland. And almost nothing that made Dragon Age unique found its way into that game. Mm-hmm. And, please don't say, oh, well, the classes and the skills and stuff, because that's not the stuff that makes the world unique.
That's window dressing.
Right. Okay. It was the unique gameplay. So, one of the things that Dragon Age really, really needed, because it was such a... It really needed some... I hate to use this phrase, because this phrase is a pet peeve of mine, but it's the way that people will understand it. It really needed more role-playing mechanics. As a combination of social interaction mechanics and also interaction or mechanics that make your particular choices have consequences. That is, when you decide to bully someone instead of negotiating with them, say, right? Instead of that just being a straight up roll this skill or that skill, some sort of lasting thing where, because you decided to bully that person, it affects the future of the game in some way, right? Because in the Dragon Age, very similar in that way to the Mass Effect games.
Yes, which makes sense because they both came from the same company, basically.
Right. I mean, well, it's the standard thing. Like, Dragon Age came first, right? And then Mass Effect?
Yeah.
Because that's the standard approach. Do it first with dragons. And after you've done it with dragons, you can do your unique thing in whatever world you want. I mean, that's how Dark Souls started, and then it went to Bloodborne. It's like, okay, it worked with dragons. Now we can do it with Lovecraftian horror in a Victorian setting. Yeah, but that's the standard approach. Do it first with dragons and then try it somewhere else. Anyway. No,
yes.
But that's the point, is it didn't do anything with what made those games unique. It was just a fairly bland fantasy adventure role-playing game. Like, all of the other bland fantasy adventure role-playing games. And in fact, like, I feel like the stunt point system, as interesting as that mechanic was, undermined it because your ability to take interesting actions was not driven by choice. It was driven by you got a random number of points, sometimes if you got lucky, that let you do different stuff. So that's literally the opposite of choice-driven play. You know, you can't be strategic and tactical unless you roll the right number on the die, and then that limits the strategies you can actually use. Okay, that was a terrible mechanic for what was it, Dragon Age?
Mm-hmm.
Especially because Dragon Age was a tactical RPG.
Yeah.
And it was a choice-driven RPG. And it was all about characterization and consequences. None of that stuff ended up on those pages.
Yeah. I know we've talked about this before, but I really feel like I should go back and give Witcher 3 another chance. But I've done it twice already. And not made it very far in.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. The problem is, it was too open worldy for me. Like, I played it for 40 or 50 hours. And I was doing, like, all of the side quests. Because you got to do all the side quests. You have to do everything.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Right? Yeah. And not making a dent in the content. And I'm like, I don't have time for this commitment in my life. I can't be with Witcher 3 for another 2 years. I'm sorry. So I had to move on. You know?
Yeah. I'm interested in a Witcher 3 RPG, tabletop RPG, but I don't know that I'm interested in enough to really jump on it and check it right out.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I think it's a wait and see deal.
To be fair, sir, you also are not a huge fan of the games.
Right.
Nor are you a big fan of the novels, apparently.
No.
So to be fair, you are probably not the person that they think would be interested in this game anyway.
Right, but by the same token, there must be something there, or I would just write it off and say, whatever.
Right.
So there has to be something about some sort of unrealized potential between the books and the video game that makes me think this would be an interesting idea.
Sure.
So now what is it? But I don't know. Perhaps it's time management skills, of which we have none because we are out of time.